What if our world was controlled by problems, reactions, and solutions devised by a global ruling class? That all the crazy panic and events we're seeing in the world today were all connected. And we are all merely players in the game of planned chaos.
As you're probably well aware, this is no ordinary election. Neither was the one in 2016 that brought Donald Trump to power. We are focusing on the U.S. elections for a few penultimate reasons. One, as the United States goes, so goes the world. Two, it appears that President Trump and certain factions that back him have literally been draining the swamp, both internally and globally, which we will cover in a future episode. 3. This swamp draining is resetting the balance of power in the most vital of ways that most people aren't aware of, in part due to the coordinated chaos that's been the hallmark of this year. The balance of power is far more than political leanings in the United States between political parties or ideologies based on the average man or woman in the streets. The parties at their core are both pushing the same agenda: concentration of wealth and power to their overlords. This is crucial to understand. The power is spread across nations to a global network, the small club that we're not in. The people are managed by media, politicians, celebrities, and in this unique year, health officials and police. The real balance of power that is shifting is among the global elite and their schools of thought and fundamental goals. Their thoughts are actually very simple. How do we stay in control? How do we maintain our grift? How do we execute our goals as stated in our protocols, our UN agendas, our new Green Deals, our Paris Climate Accords, our trade deals, and our financial structures? You see, it all comes down to a cartel doing what it has to do to protect its turf and interests. The small club is put in place to manage the status quo, or what Joe Biden calls the return to normalcy. When you stop and consider that normalcy means crashing of the markets, as happened under his watch in 2009, or the expansion of U.S. involvement in wars from 2 to 7 after President Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize despite having done nothing. Normal for these people is maintaining monopolies in healthcare, drugs, and product manufacturing, pricing, and availability. Normal is radicalizing our children through false narratives and fear. Normal is outsourcing American jobs and manufacturing to China. Normal is the gutting of the middle class. We could go on in category after category. Ethics, morals, entertainment, technology, addictions. Again, there's so many places to choose to focus on that many people are waking up and questioning, how could this be so? Okay, so there's lots of chaos in the world. As was covered in the media episode, the media exists to program us. Social media uses even more precise algorithms to keep its target audience engaged.
We now know that many of the major social media companies hire individuals called attention engineers who borrow principles from Las Vegas casino gambling, among other places, to try to make these products as addictive as possible.
It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. That is truly where we are.
Now we find ourselves in a period of mass censorship. This can't be taken lightly. So what does it all amount to? As a magician uses distraction to fool their audience, the controllers use distraction to hide their true actions and intentions. As a tool, planned chaos is used to hide true intentions. Those intentions are the goals of two main controlling groups: the globalists and the nationalists. globalists led by the Rothschilds that control global central banks, nationalists led by the Rockefellers want to expand their territory out from the United States foothold. They both have control over different central banks relative to their location. One group is in Europe and the other group is in the United States. Although both of these groups come from a long lineage of what you would call bloodline families, and although they both have a singular mission of world domination and governance, they still have slight conflicts in how they want their final solution to be obtained. As you begin to dig deeper, one discovers that these bloodline families are at odds with each other. More on this later. With world domination as their vision and raison d'etre, these families could easily be seen as diabolical, if not outright evil. So the notion of good versus evil would not be a surprising concept. Good versus evil, and literally God, or the notion of God versus Satan or Lucifer. Such religious overtones show up in certain groups, such as Zionists, Kabbalists, secret societies, intelligence agencies, and in the military-industrial complex. Alternative media sources simply lump them into two sides: the Alliance or White Hats versus the Cabal or Deep State. There are many factions within these factions, but suffice it to say that they have a whole lot at stake during the upcoming U.S. election. With their three-city empire, the U.S. is one major force in their tri-fold structure of control: military, the U.S., religion, the Vatican, and financial, London. These responsibilities have been granted to the independent city-states or districts of Washington, D.C., Vatican City, and the City of London, not London City. There's a very calculated reason for this. All roads still lead to Rome, and the largest bank in the world? The Vatican Bank.
The Institute for Religious Works is located behind the walls of the Vatican City-State and inside the massive tower built by Nicolas V. The bank was founded in 1942 by Pope Pius XII with the purpose of safekeeping the Vatican's vast assets in capital and real estate. The IOR is administered by industry professionals under the supervision of a Council of Cardinals. But because the IOR has only one central branch inside the Vatican, it has to use other banks outside the city-state to move its funds around. However, the names of its account holders are kept secret, and transactions bear no other identification than that of the IOR. This means the origins of any deposit coming into an IOR account are wiped from the record before the funds are moved out to the international banking system. And that, say critics, makes money laundering all too easy.
With these pivotal pieces identified, it comes as no surprise that Donald Trump's first 3.5 years in office have upset the apple cart.
President Trump and the new backlash this evening after his sudden decision to withdraw U.S. troops from a key border area of Syria.
Be it former intelligence assets, generals, media, financial attacks, the usual suspects are making the rounds trying to undermine people's belief in the competency of Trump.
Random information, not really think it through. It is, in a sense, I don't want to overstate this, but he is assassinating the presidency.
Well, consider that if your business and livelihood, i.e. war, and all its necessary components, isn't going to be given the status quo green light anymore, wouldn't you be crying about your horrible boss too?
Mr. Comey, you testified earlier today that you have concerns whenever the FBI doesn't operate in a, quote, competent and honest way. In your judgment, was the way that the FBI handled the Russia investigation, the surveillance of the Trump campaign, the Carter Page FISA application, the Michael Flynn investigation, was that handled in a competent and honest way?
First, Senator Cruz, there was no, to my knowledge, surveillance of the Trump campaign. I think the overall investigation of the Russian interference and whether Americans were associated with it was conducted in an honest, competent, independent way.
Okay. So, Mr. Comey, you're saying it's competent and honest. I assume you've read the Horowitz Inspector General report, which found 17 significant errors or omissions in the Carter Page FISA application. So, in your view, 17 mistakes lying to the court is competent and honest?
Well, I've read the report. I don't believe he concluded there were lies to the court, but there are significant and important failings in the way in which the Carter Page FISA was prepared and renewed.
All right, Mr. Comey, let's go directly to lies. The Inspector General report concluded that Mr. Klein Smith, an attorney who worked for you in the FBI, deliberately altered an email. He had emailed the CIA to ask if Carter Page was a source. The CIA came back and said, yes, he was a source. And Mr. Klein Smith, your lawyer, altered that email to add the words, not a source, to make the email say precisely the opposite of what the CIA said, and that fraudulent document was then used as a basis for a fraudulent submission to the FISA court. You believe that is honest and competent, Mr. Comey?
I don't believe you've offered an accurate summary of the Horowitz's findings.
Mr. Comey, I have the report right in front of me. Page 254 describes how the lawyer, specifically the words, and not a source, had been inserted in the response, directly reversing what the CIA says. Was it practice in your FBI to fraudulently alter evidence that you submit to federal courts?
It was not the practice in the FBI to fraudulently alter anything that's presented to federal courts.
Well, it is difficult to say that an investigation that featured fraudulent evidence is competent and honest. But let's move on to something else. The predicate of much of this investigation was the Steele dossier, which has now been totally discredited as garbage. When did you learn that the Steele dossier was being funded by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Again, I believe your predicate is inaccurate, but I first learned of the Steele dossier in late September of 2016 and understood that it was funded by political opposition to President Trump, or candidate Trump. I didn't know the specifics of which part of the opposition, but I knew that it was political opposition research funded.
Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
This investigation of the president was corrupt. The FBI and the Department of Justice were politicized and weaponized. And in my opinion, there are only two possibilities: that you were deliberately corrupt or woefully incompetent. And I don't believe you were incompetent.
Ambassador, I don't really have very many questions for you. You admitted in your opening statement that you don't have any firsthand knowledge of the issues that we're looking into. Were you involved in the July 25th Trump-Zelensky phone call or preparations for the call?
No, I was not.
Were you involved in the deliberations about the pause in military sales to Ukraine as the Trump administration reviewed newly elected President Zelensky's commitment to corruption reforms?
For the delay in...
For the pause.
The pause? No, I was not.
Were you involved in the proposed Trump-Zelensky, later Pence-Zelensky meetings in Warsaw, Poland on September 1st?
No, I was not.
Did you ever talk to President Trump in 2019?
No, I have not.
Mick Mulvaney?
No, I have not.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm not exactly sure what the ambassador is doing here today. This is the House Intelligence Committee that's now turned into the House Impeachment Committee. This seems more appropriate for the Subcommittee on Human Resources at the Foreign Affairs.
But let's take a step back. The first time you personally became aware of Burisma was actually when you were being prepared by the Obama State Department for your Senate confirmation hearings. And this was in the form of practice questions and answers. This was your deposition. And you testified that in this particular practice Q&A with the Obama State Department, it wasn't just generally about Burisma and corruption, it was specifically about Hunter Biden and Burisma. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And the exact quote from your testimony, Ambassador, is, quote, "The way the question was phrased in this model Q&A was, what can you tell us about Hunter Biden's, being named to the board of Burisma?" So for the millions of Americans watching, President Obama's own State Department was so concerned about potential conflicts of interest from Hunter Biden's role at Burisma that they raised it themselves.
Now, during this conversation, did the Deputy Secretary tell you about your future as the ambassador to Ukraine?
Well, he told me I needed to leave.
What did he say?
He said that, there was a lot of back and forth, but ultimately he said the words that, every Foreign Service officer understands: the president has lost confidence in you. That was, a terrible thing to hear. And I said, well, I guess I have to go then. But no real reason was offered as to why I had to leave and why it was being done in such a manner.
Did you have any indication that the State Department had lost confidence in you?
No.
And were you provided any reason why the president lost confidence in you?
No.
He's removing your profiteering, taking away your job, and exposing your crimes for all to see. When you consider the enormous business generated by the military, the idea of shortening its windfall is one of the major factors in play. Trump keeps trying to make peace, as is evidenced in North Korea, Israel, and the United Emirates. He ordered troop withdrawals in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he has not initiated any wars or military conflicts during his term. Seems a worthy and deserved nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize compared to a previous president's gifted prize. But peace is bad for business. When discovering all that is at stake, a more complete picture emerges. The picture is of systems that are threatened.
It is now 11:30 in the East. You hear that chime? We have a projection.
Trump was not supposed to win. Hillary Clinton was not supposed to lose. The Russiagate and impeachment debacles, which were nothing but thin air, were contrived to try to reverse the results of the election and preserve the status quo. They are doing everything in their power to defeat Trump in this election because he is attempting, in ways, to undo their evil world empire. They are literally fighting him for their lives and lifestyles. So let's focus on the election now. It will be a circus, the greatest show on earth, literally. Every trick in the book will be used, and there are many, many tricks. People are too comfortable with the notion that the U.S. is a beacon of truth and justice. This needs to be examined under a very bright light. Voting is the illusion of a democracy. Elections are the penultimate of order out of chaos. As Joseph Stalin said, it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. Now think about it. In just one day every 4 years, in a country of 327 million people, we gather to do our civic duty in what amounts to little more than an exercise in chaos. Americans like to assert the world over that everyone has to have their vote count. We say that this is the American dream, when in reality, it's much more of a nightmare. 1/3 of the U.S. are so disillusioned by the process that they stay home. There are those who say you get the government you deserve. If you don't participate, you give up your rights. To be silent is to consent. They know this. How is their choice in what's effectively a two-party system? We lag far behind all other major developed countries of the world in this. We have rule by the rich for the rich. This is called oligarchy. Getting on the ballot in states in the U.S. costs extreme amounts of money. Money alone doesn't guarantee anyone a way onto the ticket, much less a victory. Democrats still hold on to the notion that Russian bots swayed the election in 2016 by buying $11 million of ads and bots on social media. Yet in 2020, billionaire and Committee of 300 member Michael Bloomberg ran for the candidacy of the Democratic Party and spent close to $900 million. That's almost $1 billion. So, if you can't buy your way onto the ticket, how can you buy a presidential election? The first premise to examine is that the whole thing isn't fixed in the first place. In 2009, as a class project, teenager Brigitte D'Avignon did a genealogy project in which she traced back the family trees of all U.S. presidents. What she found was pretty remarkable. All U.S. presidents share the same common ancestor, John Lackland Plantagenet, King of England, who lived from 1167 through 1216, and was a child of Henry II, born on Christmas Eve, 1167. He's interesting because he was the King of England who sealed the Magna Carta, the English charter that put all sovereigns under the rule of law and documented the liberties held by free men. In other words, put all men under the Crown's jurisdiction. There are many who claim that the U.S. is a corporation established under the Crown and that when we obtained our freedoms, we did so in certain ceremonial ways. As shown in the media episode, British imperialists are very sensitive about having lost their hard-fought gains or territory. There is suspicion, with good backing, that the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871 brought the colonies back under rule of the Crown Corporation and that the Queen claims a stake in the corporate United States. As such, any leader of the corporation needs to be qualified as a British bloodline family member and will execute the office of President of the Corporate Board of Directors. With this understanding, their actions are usually loyal to the Crown. The word government does translate into govern men, and the British ruling class believe that they are given the right to rule over men. Remember Cecil Rhodes. The president of the board can, as in some businesses, overthrow the board and rewrite the board charter. This is where the Act of 1871 would come into play regarding actions taken by President Trump during his visit to Buckingham Palace in June of 2019, when he took over the position as sovereign of the Republic. That at least is the theory, and a very deep rabbit hole that many others cover in great detail. The point is, the system is rigged. Many say this, but can't or won't provide the details as to how. It begins with the controllers who want it rigged so. When considering who benefits from the outcome, as always, follow the money. With that in mind, winning by any means necessary is understandable as the ends always justify the means, at least in some people's opinion. The ends are maintaining power for their concentration of wealth, and also to assert their belief in their divine right to rule. This divine rule concept is seen again in a recently declassified email to Hillary Clinton in 2018, suggesting that she should overthrow the government and assume the monarchy. This at the suggestion of a mutual British friend.
How did they get their power? How did that all come to them? They get it through secrecy, and the end justifies the means. If you can get some dirt on somebody, some blackmail, then you can control whole governments. It's been estimated, I'm not saying this is a fact, but it's been estimated that probably at least a third of our Congress is susceptible to blackmail.
Rule translates into supremacy, which translates into elitism, which translates into racism, which creates a slave class regardless of the color of your skin. So staying on top of the pyramid is vital to the ruling class, and they are a small percentage that Bernie Sanders did get right when he called them the 1% of the 1%.
The fight that we are waging is not an easy fight. But I know you are prepared to wage that fight against the 1%, against the billionaire class.
With such stakes at play, any means of cheating apply. Their playbook is big, and any tactic can be used in any state, voting district, precinct, township, or city.
Murphy, you've been politely listening.
Imagine the voting scenario of the past election for a minute. The news anchors are playing the roles of their lives. They create confusion with maps and reports saying that certain key states aren't determined yet. They're playing out the card trick that there's voting discrepancy in a certain location or two, and by 1 a.m. East Coast time, there is no clear winner. Those who don't care have gone to bed and aren't seeing the magic trick play out. As a practice run in 2016, the DNC tried to go to bed on the results. And then Clinton suddenly conceded by calling to congratulate Trump. What happened in those moments will come out in history, but the playbook that was being played is called fractional magic vote rigging. And here's how it works. Fractional magic vote rigging is a real-time, precise, scalable, invisible election theft mechanism that's been used for years in election engineering around the world. Bev Harris, author of Black Box Voting, has been a researcher and intel proponent on the study of this vote-flipping trick for years. With networked computers and their processing power, the vote flipping takes place in seconds.
The absolute feature that I needed was decimals. And after having that, any amount of precision was available to me. So having access to decimals allows you to perform in finance what they call an allocation. There is one variable that nobody can predict. How many people are going to walk into a polling place? You can't know, so you have to decide how much they're going to get. You have to be sometimes in line with what polling data is saying. If it's a close race, you have to make it close. You know, when I started looking around inside of it, I found something that it reeked. The feature was a database designation to let the total votes be treated like you see money. So it allows, the term is called double, but it allows for decimal precision. So any number of decimal places between 1 and 2 are there. Any number of decimal places between 0 and 1 are there, should you decide to use it. In short, it's like having the ability to say that a vote is not a whole number. Today I'm going to demonstrate that elections can be manipulated. You can control the outcomes with an enormous amount of precision using a feature that has largely gone unnoticed in a very familiar voting system. The election summary report is going to give us what the election totals are by candidate. The precinct level report is called a SOVC, or Statement of Votes Cast. But the main thing that everybody else sees, they're going to see this guy right here. Most people are speeding through all of the races. They just want to go to the race to see who won. So I'm coming in, if I'm for Willie Harrington, I'm like, oh my God, he got baptized, right? Uh-oh. I'm going to bring up Shelby County, because that's the one that we were just doing. It latches itself on, and then it starts showing me all the available races. So I say, I want to influence Congress, right? So it says to you what races are available. I choose it, then I can select options. It brings up this form, and here is where the magic happens, where I can decide to unerring precision with n number of decimals how I want to influence early voting, absentee ballot, at the polls.
What is that thing that says LOC over there? What are those?
These are precinct locations.
That's all you do. Then how long does it take to put all those things and make it work? How long does this thing take to execute? Is that?
Yeah, it's about 10, maybe 4 or 5 seconds.
4 or 5 seconds.
Yeah. Votes are going to come in incrementally. It's, you know, we see on TV 1% reporting, 19% reporting.
Yeah. What does it do? How does it deal with the fact, you know, when do you execute this thing?
You start it at the minute that the returns come in.
Okay.
It runs, and every time new totals come in,
it then injects those percents automatically into the election results. Everything else is the actual GEM system, and the overlay that Benny developed simply uses what's already in the system.
I just created a pianist's accompaniment to use the features that were there. So I'm going to take a thumb drive out of my back pocket. We will enter fraction magic.
What follows is a demonstration in real time. The footage is uncut and unedited. It shows the actual GEMS program that is used in elections right now with a real election database.
The magic trick, though, needs the orchestration of key actors from local campaign managers to district vote stewards who are being bribed, to county vote commissioners, all the way up to TV network anchors. Remember the small club. They work in coordination with the political party officials at the local, state, and federal level to determine the numbers that they'll need to convincingly shave or flip votes in specific districts. You've witnessed this trick many times. Think of how an anchor will say, well, such and such county is coming in slowly, where candidate A holds a slight lead. But candidate B is really popular there among the union workers or the college community. This county can decide the whole state. So a battleground area is held back until all regions are in. In the presidential election, it will be well past midnight for the West Coast to report. And there will be a few counties in Pennsylvania, or Michigan, or Florida, or Wisconsin that have yet to figure out their numbers. In reality, there is no reason that electronic voting can't be tallied up and reported in minutes. But that's planned chaos for you.
So what the heck did we just see? Let's break it down. Let's start with this. You probably noticed there were some big, fat, glaring decimals in the results shown in Benny's magic show. So I asked him about that.
I need the presence of these to effectively manipulate this.
You need to have it fractionalized.
Yes.
Now, does it need to show that?
No, I just chose to show it.
So the default setting, when you get the reports, it hides all the decimals.
And now we don't see that 0.31 anymore.
Oh, so if I'm looking at this, I have no idea that you just changed everything.
And that's the purpose of showing side by side that I know that it's 16034.31, but on here it is rounded.
This played out slightly differently in the 2000 election, where candidate George W. Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, was the governor of the state of Florida.
Wanted to win.
Stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column. 25 very big electoral votes in the home state of the governor's brother, Jeb Bush, are hanging in the balance. This no longer is a victory for Vice President Gore. George Bush, governor of Texas, will become the 43rd president of the United States at 18 minutes past 2 o'clock Eastern Time. CNN declares that George Walker Bush has won Florida's 25 electoral votes.
Lo and behold, Florida had voter irregularities in the form of hanging chads. Remember the delay and ultimate concession of Al Gore? How would history have been different had that irregularity never occurred?
Stay with CNN because whatever is happening, we are going to be bringing it to you.
At the local level, they need one fixer or a fixer at the county level. You choose a big urban area to fix where the votes will seem to blend in. Remember reports of trucks that drove off with ballots, or employees throwing away ballots, or states turning up with tens of thousands of unaccounted votes? This happened in 2006 with the Senate election of Al Franken, where, oops, a box of votes just happened to disappear into the car trunk of the director of the Minneapolis elections. Of course, this year we're already being programmed by Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton to not accept the vote results or that Trump won't accept them. This is classic projection. They are really signaling to Democrats that the process will be chaos and that the results should not be believed. See the misdirection?
Arrive as late as 17 days after the election day.
There's nothing illegitimate about this election taking additional days or even weeks to make sure that all of the votes are counted. In fact, that might be important to make sure that this is a legitimate and fair election.
This is predictive programming. It will cause chaos all over the map, and they've already announced this.
We do not win if we rely on an election. We do not win if we sit back and we wait for November. We do not win.
There's a long list of fraudulent behaviors to get the end result in elections. Vote purging, lost registrations, registrations changed without consent, incorrect ballots by mail, ballot shortages, stuffing the ballot, closed polling places, disparities between exit polls and results, paid-off election officials, trucks of ballots thrown out, voter officials flipping votes, oppressive lines in poor neighborhoods. The U.S. elections will be falling into the reality of elections in third world countries. This is just something we have to understand and learn from. We do have a slight technological advantage over many countries, but this is easily manipulated by simple hacking into the designed voter systems where the vote flipping can take place. Some reports say that the voting process is reliable. Some say that the alliance has a plan for this. We'll have to see how it plays out. Certainly, there are other things in our political process that are distressing too, such as lack of term limits of career politicians when our founding fathers set up a system of public service. This has become so abused that we have the same people in office for decades, yet poll after poll after poll say there should be term limits. And this year, the pandemic has limited the campaigning process, and Joe Biden has certainly used this to his advantage. His cognitive decline is clearly evident to anyone who listens to anything he has to say.
Just since the outbreak, it's taken more than 100 years. Look, here's the lives, when you think about it.
You know, the rapidly rising I don't know.
I just spoke at Dartmouth on healthcare at the medical school, or not, I guess I wasn't actually on the campus, but the people from the medical school were at I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts. I'm not sure whether it was a medical school or where the hell I spoke, but it was on the campus.
I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
This, of course, also hides the fact that he has trouble rallying large crowds.
He's winning back the United States Senate and expanding our majority in the House of Representatives.
Especially compared to Trump. Now, COVID did stop all campaigning for a while, and Trump's recent contracting of the virus has also had an impact on the candidate's activities. But many people are left to judge Biden as a candidate from very limited exposure, as compared to Trump, who has assets constantly attacking him.
I'm watching that the parade yesterday with him in the car. That was right out of a dictator's playbook.
It's a karmic twist. Because Trump has deployed the politics of sickness in this campaign.
The president seemed to be flirting with the coronavirus by not wearing a mask and going to big rallies.
I would never want to say that the president is experiencing steroid-induced psychosis, but it is certainly concerning to see some of his actions today.
Thus, their campaign has had to make the most of their debate appearance. Debates already leave much to be desired and have lost much of their integrity over the years.
Last time at the first debate, we had millions of people fact-checking, so I expect we'll have millions more fact-checking because, you know, it's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
But as shown in the book by Donna Brazil, former contributor to CNN, speaking of the DNC role in debates, she testified that the DNC supplied the questions that would be asked in the debate to Hillary Clinton before the debate took place. When observing the debates closely, you'll notice a savvy candidate like Clinton touch her nose or face, which signals to the moderator to go back to her for a question. This is an old local circuit political hackery at the national level and allowed by media collusion.
Secretly signaling the host of the debate, Lester Holt. But just how are researchers saying this is done? Well, they say that whenever Hillary Clinton scratches her face, Lester Holt starts a process of either interrupting Trump by way of fact-checking him or handing softball questions to Hillary Clinton. Let's take a look at one example.
Many different things you have to be able to do, and I don't believe that Hillary has the stamina. Let's let her respond.
And Trump touches on NATO, Hillary signals again, and when the ball is passed back to Hillary, she seems to have what seems to be a scripted response that is perfectly timed. In total, Hillary Clinton seems to communicate by scratching her face or her nose 6 times, that is, throughout the debate.
So what about this year? If you've got a new tool, the ends justify the means.
There it is. There it is. Biden's wearing a wire.
These images appeared after the first debate and don't help the divide and claims from Trump that there's something going on. Of course, the media quickly brushed aside the claims as more lies from the Trump team. But why not question it, especially with such visual support? What would happen if the shoe were on the other foot? And this year, forget about signaling. Just use a favorable moderator or even a former intern. Debates themselves are usually restricted to certain topics as well, and don't venture into off-limits topics. As the concerns of the wealthy get covered, the real concerns of the working class people get largely ignored. But that's not the purpose of the debates anyway. Their purpose is to create the illusion of choice. Is Trump the lesser of two evils? It has to be remembered that he has the backing of money influences as well, and certainly lacks the appearance of dignity or presidential qualities that predecessors had. But for not being a legislator, he has passed much legislation and significant acts that do point to cleaning up corruption. Trump has also been bailed out by Rothschild banks before and plays nice with Israel. But it's inescapable that he hasn't been the political grifter for decades that the swamp has been. Nor did he make his billions like those in D.C. Has he been a business grifter any more than anyone else who uses tax loopholes and attorneys to their advantage? We are attempting to show you truth that mainstream media won't show you and asking why. In all facets of life today, what makes them planned chaos is the ability to maintain the narrative. Scientists have a closed mind about climate. Big Pharma covers the truth up about natural healing modalities. The CDC floods the zone with pre-approved messaging. Media earns the fake news title daily. Politicians cover up their crimes. Education radicalizes children. Celebrities play the game or they are out of the game. Large retailers stay open while small ones close. And the military always has an enemy. We try to follow the money, to follow the cures, follow verified intelligence, follow respectable stories, and to seek truth. It is up to you to decide what to do with this information. As with the scientific method, without using logical steps, we end up being driven by fear triggers. The reason books get banned, statues get overturned, history gets rewritten, stories get scrubbed from the internet, and alternative media gets censored, as well as alternative narratives, is so the controllers can shape their preferred beneficial narratives. This year, the stakes are the highest they've ever been, as many top members of the world decision-making body have faced a brutal change of tide under the Trump administration. Will the plan be allowed to continue and the swamp draining keep occurring, or will there be a return to normal, or the new normal, or perhaps the new world normal? To some, the words are interchangeable. The purpose of this episode is to get you thinking of the things to be aware of so you can share this knowledge of how this corrupt system works with others in your circle. What the corrupt powers are trying to do is create doubt and unrest in people's minds as their options are becoming more limited. Their vision of the New World Order diminishes if they do not win the presidency, but they can get their planned chaos and socially engineered people to ignite a civil war. While we sleep and stay masked indoors, they are laying siege to our republic. And forget about democracy, they are laying waste to our human rights. The fires, protests, riots, the defund movements, the removing of statues, the tearing down of government, the social engineering of schools, the stealing of wealth, the release of prisoners, the list goes on and on. The double standards and sheer hubris, arrogance, and pure evil that is rampant among these people cannot be underscored enough. If you're not seeing it, perhaps it's time to open your eyes a little wider. If you're not doing something about it, be it meditating, praying, being vocal, gathering, disobeying mandates, going to church, or posting online and trying to wake up your friends and family, then we're going to find a very disturbing future ahead of us. Only together can we disrupt and take back control over this planned chaos.
Planned Chaos was produced by volunteers of PrepareForChange.net. Our mission is to wake up the world through thought-provoking content and liberate the planet. Prepare for Change survives solely on the donations of its members. If we have succeeded in providing you information that has been useful to you in your awakening process, please consider helping our cause by giving a donation. All of our costs go to maintaining our website and the Malawi Orphanage, who we actively sponsor. To donate, please visit PrepareForChange.net. Prepare for Change Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit.
PrepareForChange.net is owned and managed by a worldwide community of volunteer lightworkers who come together to guide humanity through its planetary transition, the event. PrepareForChange.net sets the example by working for the greater good and was created at the request of the resistance movement. If you are moved to help us help the world, why not join us today? Prepare for Change brings truth so that we may change our ways into the path of grace instead of the path of slavery and destruction. Once we know we can prepare, ourselves for change and remember how to allow God's co-creative mind to assist us in making the best choices for all. Else, we will simply suffer the consequences of our inaction or unbalanced action, which is the result of ignorance. Confronting hard truths and being in service to others is the path we all benefit from. Our planet gives to us every single moment. Now it's time to give back to her. Come visit Prepare for Change to discover much, much more than you've been taught by the corrupt establishment, hell-bent on preying on your ignorance. Together, we can be the change we want to see in the world.
Members of the Awakened community, Prepare for Change supporters and humanitarians alike, we desperately need your help and generosity more than ever. As regular listeners know, we proudly founded and finance an orphanage in Malawi, Africa, that relies on our community's efforts in their daily struggles. Please help us help them by giving a charitable donation today. Your donations will provide direct assistance to improve the lives of more than 530 orphans, infirms, and widows at our orphanage in Malawi. This assistance will change their lives for the better and help sustain them. Through love, care, and education, we strive to aid our orphans out of poverty and into abundance and freedom. We can only achieve these goals with your help. Prepare for Change supports over 530 needy at the orphanage, and their daily needs are dependent on us as an organization. We provide them with financial support on a weekly basis. The vision we have for our adopted orphanage is that we can raise enough funds to eventually cover all aspects of the children's welfare. This assistance includes healthcare, formal and informal education, food and security, suitable accommodations, and safe transportation. Please hear our calls and the children's calls for help at this crucial moment. It is only with your help that we can reach our goals. We are a 501c3 charity, so your donations are a tax write-off. To donate, please visit our website, prepareforchange.net, where you can do so in a variety of ways. You can find the donate button there or donate via PayPal directly to donations@prepareforchange.net. Your donations truly make a difference.